GFUEL, short for game fuel, has positioned itself as the healthy alternative to traditional energy drinks, and has targeted its advertising heavily towards gamers. I have never had an energy drink in my life, and rarely if ever consume caffeine, but I was curious and skeptical about GFUEL's claims that their product boosted gaming performance, so I decided to try it out myself and ran an informal scientific experiment to see if GFUEL does indeed help. Of course, the effects of caffeine and other ingredients in energy drinks have been studied before, but to the best of my knowledge, no one has done a proper investigation into the potential benefits for video games specifically. Since GFUEL is claiming it helps gamers do better, will the benefits of caffeine that have been shown in scientific studies, like a boost to reaction time or improved mood, lead to measurable and significant increases in performance in video games, which test many varying skills in a complex, chaotic environment? Let's find out. Before continuing, I should say that in the interest of making this video as concise as possible, I decided to add annotations, sort of like footnotes, to certain parts where I have more information to say which is relevant or clarifying, but the info is not 100% necessary. Whenever this green box pops up in the corner, there is an annotation for whatever I'm saying at that time, which can be found in the description. First off, it is necessary to know what exactly is in GFUEL, why, and if the ingredient's supposed effect is scientifically proven, because I think you'll be quite surprised by the amount of scientific backing for GFUEL's ingredients list. I will be specifically talking about the pink lemonade 9.8 ounce tub, but all flavors are pretty much the same except for the flavorings used. The most important ingredient is, of course, caffeine. A normal and suggested serving of 7 grams of GFUEL has 150 milligrams, which is the same as a Starbucks 16-ounce cappuccino or 33 fluid ounces of Mountain Dew. Caffeine has been scientifically proven to reduce fatigue, boost alertness and reaction time, and improve mood. It's also a diuretic. It makes you pee more. One study found 275 milligrams of caffeine reduced motor reaction time by 59 milliseconds. But that study also found that energy drink consumption worked worse than drinking straight caffeine in certain areas, though the energy drink boosted reaction time more than just the caffeine. I could talk about caffeine for hours, but we have to move on. Taurine is another important ingredient in GFUEL. It is the most abundant ingredient of their so-called energy complex. There is likely about 1 gram per 7 gram serving. It makes up about 0.1% of the weight of the human body and is made by the pancreas. If you have a standard diet, the taurine in GFUEL is completely unnecessary. It's possible it has a mild depressant effect, so when it's combined with a stimulant like caffeine, it could help balance out the more jittery effects of the caffeine. But the evidence is very weak for this claim. L-citrulline malate is the next most abundant energy complex ingredient. Both citrulline and malate are naturally made by the body and consumed in a normal diet, so supplementation is not necessary. It has been proven to help with physical endurance, like giving a boost to cyclists' stamina. Since gaming is not exactly the most physically demanding activity, this ingredient pretty much does nothing. N-acetyl L-carnitine, or simply acetylcarnitine, is the only other energy complex ingredient proven to do anything useful related to gaming. It has been proven to boost the mental abilities of old people. I'm talking at least 60 years old. So it does nothing for me. Moving to the focus complex, L-tyrosine is by far the most important ingredient. With a standard diet, you get plenty of it for normal function. It has been proven to boost cognitive performance in stressful conditions or when sleep deprived. However, it does nothing to help you under normal conditions. The effects are pretty significant, so the scientific basis for the use of tyrosine is strong. The other focus complex ingredients either don't do anything or have very minuscule and unsupported effects. The antioxidant complex is just a bunch of fruit powders and extracts. An antioxidant stops the reaction of oxygen with molecules in the body, which supposedly helps prevent disease. Such claims have little to no scientific basis. GFUEL also has a bunch of vitamins. If you have a normal diet and don't have any health problems requiring you to take extra vitamins, these will do nothing for you. They're a marketing gimmick. The other ingredients listed at the bottom make up about half the mass of the serving. Maltodextrin is just a chain of glucose sugars. This is the biggest source of energy in GFUEL, and by energy I mean calories. Its primary purpose seems to be filler, but perhaps it is included for the small number of calories. And the final ingredient of note is sucralose, which is a sugar substitute about 500 times sweeter than table sugar. GFUEL claims the high levels of sucrose in other drinks, like the standard Monster Energy and Red Bull, cause you to crash. And of course it is quite unhealthy to consume over the recommended amount of sucrose each day. What are the benefits of using GFUEL? Well, zero sucrose is quite nice, but that's sort of becoming the industry standard now. The main benefits come from the caffeine, and tyrosine as well, if you are overly stressed or sleep deprived. The taste is another important, though subjective, factor. People tend to enjoy at least one of GFUEL's flavors. It also should be noted that though the vast majority of ingredients are superfluous when it comes to gaming performance, perhaps with them all together, all their marginal and unsubstantiated benefits may combine and produce a slightly less marginal effect. Another potential benefit is the placebo effect. By just believing the product helps you game better, you actually do perform better. What are the downsides of GFUEL? Cost is a big one. The most bang for your buck option is the 9.8 ounce tub, which costs about $30 with the common 30% off deals they have going on. This has 40 servings, which might sound like a lot, but compare it to just buying the main active ingredient, caffeine, by itself, and whatever flavorings you want if you want to turn it into a drink, which isn't even necessary. You can get hundreds of servings of caffeine for under $10. This is really a problem with most energy drinks and supplements, but most of it is made of stuff that just doesn't do anything except sell it to people that don't know any better. If the high cost is worth it to you for the other ingredients, even while knowing what they do and don't do, or for the flavor, then go ahead. Another downside is convenience. You have to make the drink yourself, which takes time and effort. Taking a pill of caffeine is much more convenient, though a lot less appealing and cool. You also have to constantly shake up the GFUEL drink while consuming it because the powder forms a suspension in water, even when shaken up for 3+ minutes. Caffeine also creates a mild dependence, so if you are constantly using GFUEL, it can be hard to stop. It might be better to just not get hooked on any caffeine and perhaps get the recommended amount of sleep instead. So, does GFUEL boost gaming performance? Does it work better than just taking caffeine? Is it all just a marketing gimmick? And how much does it make you pee? Pretty much every good experiment you'll find testing this kind of stuff will be double-blind placebo-controlled, which just means that neither the participant nor the administrator knows who is getting the drug, and there is a control group which doesn't get the drug at all. That's just good experimental design, which is why I have conducted my test in a similar way. Unfortunately, these good experiments also have large sample sizes, usually around 50, but ideally more than 1,000 people. I had 2, myself and my brother. It was important to do as much gaming as possible to counteract the small sample size, but even still, whatever results we get should be taken with a massive grain of salt, because there is a chance we were outliers and don't get affected by caffeine the same as other people. We are also quite similar, sharing a fair bit of DNA. The dosage of caffeine in a serving of GFUEL for us is about 1.8 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, so if you weigh less or more than us, you might experience a stronger or weaker effect, respectively. We are both in our early 20s, so if you are younger, the usefulness of caffeine may be less, and if you're older, it may be more. The general setup for the experiment is this. We will determine a baseline of performance, compare that to a placebo of sugar, to taking just caffeine, and taking GFUEL. Since sugar is not a neutral placebo, it actually could have an effect on the testing, the baselines were all done with the same amount of sugar as the placebo. The gaming test I decided to do is what I like to call the gauntlet. I specifically designed the gauntlet to test several different areas, not just reaction time, in different environments, while at the same time sticking to things which I am already proficient at. This last part is necessary to limit the amount of improving over time as I play, getting better with more experience. The gauntlet involves 6 6-minute matches of Modern Warfare 2019, playing with no teammates and 6 veteran bots on the enemy team, while I always used this specific class and killstreak setup, each game alternating between the maps Shoot House and Hackney Yard. I record my number of kills and deaths and my KD ratio. This test is the most variable of all the tests, as it most accurately recreates the conditions of a real online match. The most variable thing is the loadout for the bots, which guns and equipment they use, which seems random. Playing actual online matches would be ideal, but it would introduce way too many variables to be useful, including connection quality, map selection, team size, and enemy player ability. Then I take the human benchmark reaction time test 35 times and record my average time, median time, standard deviation, which is just the measurement of the amount of variance in the numbers, and my best and worst reaction times. This is the most straightforward test, and is the only one in which an intrinsic ability is being directly measured. Then, I run the Pit on Modern Warfare 2 15 times, using the MP5K and default pistol. I record my average and median times, standard deviation, and average civilians accidentally shot. Yes, accidentally. This test is pretty self-explanatory, but it mostly tests fine motor skills, just my ability to aim and move around properly and precisely. After that, I play 30 minutes of the arcade game Bosconian. Upon each game over, I continue the game as quickly as possible. I record my total score gained across the 30 minutes, my number of continues needed, my average score per minute, the round reached, and my average score per round. Bosconian is a good game to use because it's fast-paced and non-stop action. It also relies heavily on your ability to quickly acquire peripheral targets and make snap decisions. Then comes a test which might seem a little odd at first. A 50 US states quiz by Cetera. Across 10 tests taken in a row, I record my average and median completion times, standard deviation, and percent accuracy. This test I chose because it tests your reaction time for the randomized next state to click, your ability to associate that name with the correct state, and your motor skills to quickly click the correct location. And finally, I played 6 more matches of Modern Warfare, exactly the same as the first 6. The entire gauntlet took me on average 2 hours and 42 minutes to get through. Unfortunately, my brother is not experienced with the same games I am, and also he didn't want to do as extensive of a regimen, so I adapted my gauntlet into one just for him, which I like to call the Sally. First, he played 10 6-minute games of Black Ops 2 on the Xbox 360 against 9 hardened difficulty bots, rotating between the maps Hijacked, Grind, and Studio, while always using the same class and kill streaks. The same data are recorded as with my Modern Warfare games. Then he does 65 reaction time tests, same data recorded as with me as well. The Sally took on average 1 hour and 32 minutes to complete. After we had finished with the gauntlet or the Sally, we made sure to write down a brief description of how we felt during the testing. Now that you know what gaming we did, you need to know how exactly the experiment was carried out so that you can understand the results. This might seem like it's overcomplicated, but everything was done with a purpose. To achieve a true double-blind experiment comparing GFUEL to only caffeine and to a placebo, we first had to figure out how to make it so we didn't know what we were consuming. Here's what we did. There were 3 identical cups we could choose from, each containing a different drink. In one drink was a serving of GFUEL and 415 milliliters of water. The 7 grams was measured using a scale, not the scooper, because that's too inconsistent. In another cup was 1.5 100 milligram caffeine pills, along with 23.3 grams of pink lemonade mix. This mix was added to make the non-GFUEL drinks taste almost the same as the GFUEL. Unfortunately, the sugar-free pink lemonade mix tasted too different from the GFUEL, so we had to use the one that was 92% sugar by weight. Because it's basically just flavored sugar, I'll be referring to the mix as simply sugar from now on. It does though have a small amount of some other stuff, but that should not have any effect on the testing. And in the third and final drink was just 23.3 grams of the sugar. This is the placebo. Though all the drinks taste similar, they're not exactly the same. So we covered our tongues in toothpaste every time we drank. Toothpaste messes with your taste buds and made it impossible to tell the difference between the drinks. There needed to be some way to be able to know which drink I was having without either my brother or myself knowing. We decided to split the information for which drink we were having between the two of us, so that only once both our pieces of information were put together could one of us actually know what drink we had had. Each of us made a key corresponding to the drinks. Only one of us would know that key. When I was making the drinks for my brother, I labeled the drinks with A, B, and C, corresponding to the contents of the drink. Then I would leave the room as my brother drank one of the drinks and recorded which letter it was. He would then dispose of the other two drinks. Now only he knows the letter of the drink, and only I know what the letter means. My brother's key used the letters X, Y, and Z. Here is the schedule we followed. Every day we got roughly 8 hours of sleep, give or take 15 minutes, usually give. For all tests, we waited exactly 20 minutes after we drank to when the first test started. The first day, we ran through the gauntlet and the Sally without recording anything. This was to familiarize ourselves with the testing. The next day, we drank the sugar drink and recorded our results. This baseline day's results should not be considered and are only going to be presented to show the amount of progress we made improving at the tests over time. All baseline days entailed drinking the placebo drink. The next day was the first day the baseline counts. For the daytime trials, my brother drank his drink on average at 11:21 a.m., and I drank mine at 12:35 p.m. The following 3 days, we ran through the 3 different drinks, testing during the daytime. We then took a day off for rest and came back for the night trials. My brother drank on average at 9:29 p.m. and I drank at 11:16 p.m. My gauntlet was slightly modified for the night tests. I simply did 35 reaction time tests at the end. This was done to see if my times dipped as the night progressed, since I should be getting more tired throughout the gauntlet. It is expected that the caffeinated drinks will result in less of a drop in reaction time and gaming skill compared to the placebo. The next half of the testing is where things might get a bit complicated, but it all makes sense. In order to speed up the rate of testing so we could be done as quick as possible, we decided to run 2 tests per day, one during the daytime and one at night. Each daytime/nighttime couple, we drank the same drink, so within the same day we always drank the same letter. The daytime/nighttime tests within the same day should be independent, so it's fair to combine all the day testing done during this time with the earlier day tests, and the same for the nighttime tests when comparing our overall scores from daytime and nighttime tests and other analyses. Here's where my brother and I's schedules diverge. I decided to do a run-through of tests while sleep-deprived to try to measure the effects of tyrosine in GFUEL. My brother wasn't really up for that, so I did it alone. In order to not completely torture myself for this seemingly pointless grand experiment, I still did sleep, mostly to stave off boredom, but I didn't sleep much. Once I woke up, I made sure to limit my exposure to sunlight in order to keep my circadian rhythm out of whack. Just in case you don't think I was actually sleep deprived based on all that, trust me, I could feel it. A couple times near the start of Modern Warfare matches, I confused the scoreboard with my ammo count and started panicking over having only a few bullets left. So yeah, not the most mentally sharp I've ever been. For these sleep-deprived tests, I on average drank at 8:44 a.m., and they were conducted in a similar way to the day tests, but it was a bit different. First, for the gauntlet, I did 50 reaction time tests, not 35. The drink labeling and key system was also changed up a bit. I made a different key that only I knew. The 3 letters I used were N, O, and P. On day 13, I did the baseline for sleep deprived, then I took a rest day. Then I alternated each day, doing the daytime/nighttime normal sleep runs, and then the next day doing the sleep deprived test. My brother had an off day for each day I did a sleep deprived. Once all 3 drinks were done for each type of test, my brother did a daytime baseline, and that was the last test he did. I took a day off, and then did the baseline the next day. 3 days later, I ran through the gauntlet at night again, but this time I drank a can of Monster Energy first. I drank the can at 11:43 p.m. and did the gauntlet the same as if it was a normal night run. The next day, I did a normal nighttime baseline. That was my final day of testing. Not counting the first 2 days of testing, which were more for getting acclimated to the regimen, in total, my brother played 170 matches, or 17 hours of Black Ops 2, and measured his reaction time 1,105 times. And I played 276 matches, or 27.6 hours of Modern Warfare, measured my reaction time 1,215 times, ran the pit 375 times, played 11.5 hours of Bosconian, and clicked on 11,500 US states, all in the name of science. Now, I'm going to show you all the results, but I won't tell you what the letters correspond to. You'll get to look at the data unbiased as well, and see if you can tell which times we took GFUEL versus just caffeine or sugar. This is important because, believe it or not, interpreting statistics is not as objective as you might think, especially in this case. Here, we had to factor in the fact that we improved over time, and how much different we did compared to the baselines. Therefore, you can't just plug our stats into some formula that spits out a comparative rating for each dataset, at least without it being quite flawed or incomplete. There's quite a lot of subjective interpretation involved. If I just showed you which drink corresponded to which data, you might rationalize the results in a biased manner. Let's go over my brother's data first, and then mine. This is how he said he felt every day. Baseline days, of course, he just felt normal, so there's nothing for those. I added a handy star rating from 1 to 5, corresponding to the subjective feelings he experienced. A 5-star means he felt really good, and a 1-star means he felt normal, or even below normal. Here is the Black Ops 2 average kills and KD ratio for each Sally. Each dot represents the 10-game average. I don't know yet which drink he had for any of these, hence the question marks. And I also added in the star ratings so you can compare how he did to how he felt. Some of the charts in this video do not have the y-axis starting at 0, so keep that in mind. This thing here is what I like to call the bar of significance, which is kind of a weird thing, but let me explain. It can be hard to define how much of a difference in performance is required for the difference to be significant, both statistically and experientially. Instead of running a bunch of statistical tests for significance, which might not really mean anything for the actual game, I decided to subjectively confer an amount which makes a difference between the data points significant to me while in-game. A difference between any 2 points greater than this is significant in my opinion. You can clearly see my brother improved over time. Though he is experienced with the game, he doesn't have as much experience playing against bots, which explains how he could have improved by around 8 more kills per game from beginning to end. He did a bit better during the night runs, but the difference isn't much. How he felt during the games doesn't seem to be reflected in the data too well, except in a couple cases. Can you tell which days he took the placebo? How about we move on to reaction times? Here are the average and median times for the 65 runs per Sally. You can clearly tell he did better for the daytime runs. That might seem odd considering his nighttime Black Ops 2 stats were a bit better than the daytime ones, and I think this is strong evidence that having a faster reaction time does not necessarily translate into better gameplay. There are just too many factors involved, but of course it can't hurt to be able to react 10 milliseconds or more faster. When you consider a single frame of a 60 FPS game is 16.7 milliseconds, that boost doesn't seem like much, because it isn't. You should be able to at least tell which times he took the placebo here, in conjunction with the data from Black Ops 2. Here are the best and worst reaction times achieved, but these I don't think are as reliable data points because too much luck is involved. Now for the reaction time standard deviation. For all the standard deviations, it honestly seemed pretty random to me whether it would be high or low for a given Gauntlet or Sally. I'll show the reaction time one because the reaction time test is probably the most important, but I will not show the other standard deviations later on for the Gauntlet. Now it's time to reveal which drinks my brother had each day. I can take advantage of the fact that each of us had limited knowledge to make a form of data analysis out of our guesses. This will form one of the two pillars of analysis of the data in this video. It's also just fun to guess things and see if we were right, am I right? First, my brother will try to guess the key I made. One guess is based purely on how he felt, and the other guess is based on the data. Since he already knows the letter of the drink for each day, and we do not yet, we won't be able to guess along with him. But if he can get it right, that is evidence that GFUEL does indeed work. You might disagree with our guesses and think we did a different drink on a different day, which is completely fine. So if our guesses are wrong, that isn't concrete proof GFUEL sucks or anything. It's just up for debate whether it noticeably improves performance. For all our guesses, we assumed GFUEL would result in the best feelings and best stats. Caffeine would be second, and the placebo would be last. This de facto is our analysis of which days we did better or worse. Anytime we guess GFUEL, that means we think those days we did the best. Also, by guessing first based on what we wrote down for how we felt during the tests, and then based on the data of how well we did, it shows whether or not feeling better translates into better stats. Here are my brother's guesses for the key I made. That is 100% correct.
No way!
But based on feelings, you were totally wrong. Completely wrong. It's looking good for GFUEL at this point, at least in terms of the stats. Now that the key is common knowledge, here are the guesses I had for the order of drinks my brother took. On feelings, I was once again quite wrong.
He was quite wrong. Sovern Gaming. Freaking
idiot! That's it for my brother's testing. Now let's do the same thing with my own more complicated sets of data. This time I will show you which letter I drank for each day, X, Y, or Z, and we will guess the key afterward. Since my brother does not know which letter I had, he can also guess the correct order the same as I did for him. Here is how I said I felt each day, with the whole star system thing too. This is my Modern Warfare average kills and average kill-death ratio per 6-game session. You can see that I got better over time. Each day has 2 sessions, one from the beginning of the gauntlet and the other from the end. Not every dataset has 2 points per day, like say reaction times. Here are my average and median times in milliseconds. Each day is only 1 dot, except for the nighttime trials, which have 2. So far, do you think you know which letter is GFUEL? Here are my standard deviations for the reaction time tests. Again, I'm not too sure how important these are. Now the Modern Warfare 2 pit trial times for the 15 runs per gauntlet. I got better over time here as well. For reference, my best time ever accomplished is 19.25 seconds. Here are the average civilians shot per session. This seems less useful than the times, but perhaps it means something. Now with the Bosconian stuff, there are a lot of data points which I recorded, but I'll only show the 3 which I think are the most useful. First is the number of continues used for the 30-minute session. The massive spikes for the sleep-deprived runs have to mean something, right? Next is the total score gained for the 30 minutes. I definitely got better over time here. However, taking a look at the average score per round, I actually got a bit worse over time. What this means is that I was getting further into the rounds, usually reaching at least round 14, but each round I got a bit less score. And finally, with the 50 states quiz, here are the averages for the 10 quizzes taken per gauntlet. I got considerably better over time. For the percent accuracy, I did not improve over time, and there is not a clear distinction between different times of day. Now that you have seen the data with my letter labels and my star ratings based on feelings, it's time to reveal what each letter represents. Here are my guesses for my brother's key that he used on my drinks. Based on the data, I had GFUEL and caffeine mixed up.
I was going to reveal that.
And here are his guesses for the order I took the drinks. So based on the data, you were quite wrong, and based on the feelings, you were wrong as well.
Oh, wow.
Interesting indeed.
That is very interesting.
This time there was quite a few more mixed up answers. Most importantly, I mixed up GFUEL and caffeine with my guess for the XYZ key. That means based on my results, I could not tell the difference between taking caffeine and taking GFUEL. My brother also mixed up GFUEL and caffeine, meaning he thought I performed better for the days I took caffeine. Now on to the sleep-deprived tests. That tyrosine hopefully kicked in and did something. If we can't guess these correctly, then there's little hope left for GFUEL. My brother will guess the key.
According to the data, I was right. Whoa!
Okay. And then I will guess the order I did the drinks. Interesting, so I mixed up the GFUEL and the caffeine. Hopefully you can see that besides my brother's guess for the key based on data, I think he just got lucky. We mixed up GFUEL with caffeine quite a bit. That's not good at all for GFUEL. Now remember about sample size, there was only one round of tests while sleep deprived, and I was the only one who did them. With all the data revealed alongside our guesses about each drink, we can grade each drink based on how we guessed. And I will be using a 0 to 2 scale. So how this works is, for example, if I guessed my brother took GFUEL on a certain day, meaning that I interpreted he performed the best on that day, but it turns out he actually took sugar, then sugar will get a score of 2 for that day. If I think he took sugar and he actually did, then sugar will get a 0 for that day. The drink with the highest score ended up performing the best according to our somewhat subjective analysis. Here are my brother's results based on my guesses. For feelings, sugar came out on top and caffeine did terribly. Based on the data, GFUEL did the best, so caffeine was last for both. So that's looking good for GFUEL. And with my brother's guesses about me, for the feelings, caffeine and GFUEL tied way ahead of sugar. Based on the data, caffeine came out strong, and sugar did terribly. Interesting, my brother and I reacted very differently to the caffeine. I did the best with it, and he did the worst, at least according to our data analysis through guesses. But guessing what we drank, while a form of data analysis, is just a bit too subjective to be the whole of the analysis for this video. Since we didn't know the correct answers yet, we were unbiased, but people can be surprisingly bad at judging the better set of stats. However, since we got to analyze the data ourselves, certain intangibles can be accounted for, like how much better we did compared to the previous baseline, or if there was a significant drop in performance during a nighttime run. These things being much harder to account for in more straightforward, data-centric analyses. So the guessing form of analysis is still useful, but it should just be accompanied by another analysis method. Earlier, I said it wasn't possible to just plug our stats into some formula that spits out a comparative rating for each drink, but I'm gonna try to rank the 3 drinks' performances in a somewhat objective way anyways. I came up with a method of data analysis that isn't perfect, that's impossible, but hopefully it analyzes the data in a fair way, and it might actually be better than the guessing method. I call it the percent helpfulness metric. Let me explain using my brother's data. First, I found the average for every data point that I believe to be useful for every drink. I had to decide which data points to consider, since I don't think all the ones I collected are worthy of being considered. The reason I included both the reaction time average and median is because the reaction time test, in my opinion, is the most important test, so it should be weighed more heavily. The average combines all the runs with that drink into a single number. I then compared each data point average to the average for the baseline tests by finding the percent difference. Let's just focus on average kills as an example. The percent difference equation looks like this, so plugging in my brother's values, you get this percent difference. The sign for each number corresponds to whether the difference is an improvement or not. Negative means the drink did worse than the baseline. Here are all the other data points for my brother. You can see that even the biggest difference isn't all that big, which just means that my brother was pretty consistent throughout the testing. This is the average percent difference for the data points. Since we ran so many tests, even a small difference is technically statistically significant if you run a paired t-test on the results. Like with the reaction times, a difference for a drink of only 2 milliseconds from the baseline is statistically significant at over 95% confidence. Because statistical significance is not the ideal benchmark to be basing our level of significance, since 2 milliseconds is basically unnoticeable during gameplay, I initially used the values from the bar of significance I had been using earlier to measure a more meaningful amount of difference expected, which is significant. However, since we are averaging so many more values together here compared to back when I made the values for the bar of significance, where single day averages were being compared to another, versus here where 4 or more days averages are being compared, I thought it was justified to modify the bar of significance values for this new context. And here they are. We can create a theoretical set of averages where for each data point my significance threshold has been reached in the beneficial direction, and the average percent difference for that run can be compared to the 3 drinks average percent difference. Dividing each drink's average percent difference by the theoretical average percent difference and multiplying by 100, we finally get what I call the percent helpfulness. This shows how significantly the drink helped out and in what direction. Negative meaning the drink actually hurt, all relative to the baseline. For my brother, only the sugar placebo seemed to actually help out, with GFUEL doing slightly worse than the baseline, and straight caffeine actually hurting by quite a large amount, relatively speaking. But as you notice, all these percentages are less than 100%, meaning none of the drinks had what I would consider a truly significant, helpful, or harmful effect. As a bonus, we can mess around and take out certain data points from consideration to see if anything changes. Like with the GFUEL, if his KD is not considered, the percent helpfulness actually jumps up to first place, ahead of the placebo. Or if the placebo's reaction time standard deviation is taken out, it jumps up to 50.71%. That's over half usefulness. Now let's move on to my data and do the same thing, with these being the data points for consideration and these being the values for significance which I chose. Again, the percent differences from the baseline are all quite small. Looking at the percent helpfulness, caffeine has the clear number 1 spot, with GFUEL a bit behind. The placebo showed a slight harmful effect, but again, none of them reached 100%, so I would still say none of the drinks made a significant difference on my performance. Again, messing around, if I remove the Bosconian average total score from the caffeine run, the percent helpfulness jumps up to 81.85%, which is pretty good, but still not all that great in the grand scheme of things. Or if I remove my reaction time standard deviation from the placebo runs, the helpfulness goes to basically 0. Here are the 2 takeaways from my brother's and I's percent helpfulnesses for each drink. The first is that we had the exact opposite reaction. I did the best with caffeine, and he did the worst. I did the worst with the placebo, and he did the best. This means that more than likely the effects of caffeine on different people when it comes to gaming performance vary greatly. Who knows if it'll help or hurt you? This might be because caffeine is arguably the strongest drink out of the 3, since GFUEL supposedly has ingredients which take the edge off of caffeine. People who don't do well with caffeine alone really do not like it, and people who do benefit from caffeine do really like it, perhaps. And second, none of the drinks in all honesty had that significant of an effect on the numbers. This could just be us. Perhaps other people experience a stronger boost. GFUEL did not give us significantly better results than placebo or the baseline, let alone the caffeine. I'm not exactly sure why. My guess is this is due to all the added ingredients creating different effects on people. Some people might benefit from the taurine, the tyrosine, the toothed club moss aerial parts extract, like probably my brother, and others might do just fine or even react more favorably towards just the caffeine. There's so much variability and complexity with human physiology that who's to say how your brain and body will react to GFUEL? Funnily enough, if you do the percent helpfulness analysis for our feelings, using the stars and assuming baseline is 1 star and a significant difference from that is 3 stars, we ended up feeling better with every drink on average. I think this is caused by the placebo effect, which is most obvious in the case of the placebo drinks. We just expected to feel good, and so we did. Comparing my brothers and I's drink scores across the guessing analysis and the percent helpfulness, you can see quite clearly an inconsistency between us in terms of what drinks we did better with. This is not too surprising to me, and I think it clearly shows the problems with using a small sample size in experiments. You can't exactly draw concrete conclusions from contradictions, except the fact that there is contradictory evidence. And to make matters worse, if I had analyzed the data in some other way, I could have concluded different, but probably not drastically different, results. Hopefully by using 2 very different methods of analysis and showing you how they work, you can decide for yourself which drink did the best for each of us, and if the increase in performance was significant. I didn't want to just come out and decree that one drink was the winner, because it's much more complicated than that. The best way to do well in-game is not to get yourself dependent on a chemical. It's to get a good night's rest, see my drop in performance while sleep deprived, and to just play the game. We improved over time way more than we improved with any of the drinks, and our improvement remained consistent as we gained more experience, compared to the fickle boost that Caffeine or GFUEL offered. Clearly, I underestimated our capacity to refine our gaming skills. Practice beats GFUEL or any other chemical concoction any day. I bet you thought I forgot about the Monster Energy test, but nope. Based on how I felt and how I performed, I didn't experience a sugar crash like GFUEL's marketing team would have you believe. In fact, it seems the majority of people do not experience sugar crashes. My performance, I would say, was on par with the others, not significantly different from the GFUEL or the baseline, but then again I only tested it for 1 gauntlet. The actual downside to using high sugar energy drinks, for at least me, isn't crashing, it's the fact that all that sugar is just bad for you. The zero sugar options are a completely different story though. So is GFUEL worth it for you? I don't know, honestly, but it probably is not, given how it did for us. If for some reason you really need that caffeine hit, I recommend at least trying straight up caffeine first. It worked better for me and worse for my brother, so it seems a bit hit or miss, but it's much cheaper than GFUEL or other supposed energy boosts. Taking nothing at all works pretty well too, so maybe try that if you haven't yet. And not taking caffeine means no extra trips to the bathroom. In fact, one of the biggest signs we had taken caffeine or GFUEL was how often we peed in the few hours after drinking. I specifically tried not to keep track of this so that it would not influence my speculations about what I had consumed. So what do you think? Is GFUEL a scam, or does it actually help you out when you play games? If you think GFUEL actually does help you perform better, are you sure it's not just the placebo effect? And if it is, does that actually bother you? Would you have done the analysis or even the entire experiment differently? Am I a crazy person for putting this much time and effort into answering a question where no matter what result I get, nothing in the world will change and no definitive conclusions can be drawn because of the small sample size? Or am I crazy for thinking the answer to that question could be no? And as always, thanks for watching. And that's a wrap, folks. That's a wrap.
Yeah, you skinny little boys playing Legos.
Go watch a different YouTube video.
Yeah, stop watching Legos.
One with less wind in it. Yeah.